As years went by and people retired, the truth started coming out, the rest of the story. There were multiple witnesses everywhere. People in the WSA saw triangular objects. When we saw the half moons turn to moons, they said they were actually triangular objects. As they had powerful binoculars, they were watching them.
Oh, wow.
They saw motherships. They saw stuff coming off the motherships like little drones or sparks or something. All kinds of things. The air traffic controllers came forward and said, we picked it up on radar twice. It went across the screen, what they call a bright 2. It's a type of radar. 60-mile scope and went across it in seconds. 2,000, 3,000 mile an hour. Twice it went across the screen. He said a normal plane goes blip every sweep. You see a blip, blip, blip. He said this was a streak with a thing behind it. He says, unbelievable. He said, all the years we've been air traffic controllers, we've never seen anything like this. It came back, hovered, glowing orange-red object near them within 100, 150 yards.
Wow.
They saw it go into the forest where we were.
Incredible.
And a whole lot more witnesses have come forward. A total of more than 50 people from 8 or 10 different locations actually saw the glowing objects and saw the objects in the sky.
Greetings and welcome to the Vortex. I'm your host, Daniel Allen Jones, and I'm honored to be joined here by Charles Halt.
Oh, my pleasure.
So, you have been part of something in history that I think has changed the way that we perceive not just the subject of UFOs, and we are here at the Edinburgh Out of This World UFO Conference talking about the subject. You're part of something that's really changed the scope of what we understand in regard to this field. And you at the time were a colonel in the Air Force here at Suffolk, England, at the Bentwaters Royal Air Force Base.
RAF Bentwaters.
So take us back nearly 40 years ago, and how this all folded out over the period of 3 nights back in 1980 in December.
Well, to start with, this is not something I wanted to be thrust into, and I fell into it, I guess is the best way to put it. I was called upon to investigate something. Our security police had gone out into the forest adjacent to the base to investigate what they thought was a downed aircraft. Now, this was on the night of December 25th, the morning of the 26th. In other words, Christmas night and the following morning, primarily the following morning. 3 of them were off the base to investigate what appeared to be a downed aircraft. We knew nothing was flying because the air traffic controllers, the weapons monitors that ran the radar system, Heathrow Tower, everybody said nothing's flying, nothing in the area, but there's obviously something on the ground that appeared to be structured and had multicolored lights on it. The 3 of them went out into the forest to investigate, and they come upon a craft of some type, about 8 or 9 feet on a side, triangular, about 6 feet high, on a tripod base off the ground. It was smooth, they said warm, appeared to be sort of metallic. It had strange markings on it like hieroglyphics.
Wow.
Now exactly what happened, because the craft did something to these people, I'm firmly convinced. And one of the 3 said he saw one of them actually getting beamed up into it. They took a lot of pictures, which were turned out to be fogged, or they were told they were fogged. There were 40 minutes of time that we could not communicate from the base with them on their radios. And these are good Motorola 5-watt radios, which are pretty powerful. They came back to the base of the Wild Tail about seeing this object. The object left them at very high speed. Well, nobody really believed too much. They knew something happened, but nobody could explain it. So something happened. Following night, and I didn't learn this till years later, the on-duty senior police officer, who happened to be a female, saw lights again in the same area, and she went out in her Jeep to investigate, and she had a nervous breakdown.
Wow.
Now, I didn't know she went out in the forest. I knew she had a nervous breakdown, and what I thought happened was the stress of the job was just too much or something. Who knows? The 3rd night, 3 nights later, we were having what we called the end of the year party, Christmas party, whatever, just to recognize people for their accomplishments for the year. Give people a pat in the back and thank them for all they've done and whatnot. We just finished a meal, and we're getting ready to have dessert, when the on-duty flight chief, senior police officer, came in, white as a sheet. And he wasn't a typical police officer. He had been in the Marine Corps for 4 years. He was a pretty hard guy, gone back to school, got commissioned in the Air Force. So he wasn't a typical lieutenant, is what I'm saying. He didn't get rattled easily. He was a pretty tough guy.
Yeah.
He was really shaken. He said, I need to talk to you and the base commander now. I said, what's the matter? He said, let's talk privately. So the only private room in that little building was the coat room. So we went into the coat room, and he said, it's back. Of course, we said, what's back? He said, the UFO. What? You know, in disbelief. I said, what do you know? He said, well, we saw lights out in the forest, and we went out in the forest. I said, you went off the base? Yes. And the base commander and I looked at each other, and he said, why don't you go out and put this to rest? There's got to be an explanation. So I had a suit on, so I said, I'll go home and change clothes. You come by with a patrol and pick me up, and we'll go out and we'll put this to bed. Get rid of it. This has got to go away. Too many cops are looking at the sky. They're not paying attention to what they're supposed to be doing. So I went home and changed clothes. They picked me up. We went and got a disaster preparedness officer who was on duty, standby man. I said, bring a Geiger counter along so we can show there was no radiation out there. You know, I was trying to think of anything else I could take along to disprove it.
Yeah.
And I had my tape recorder that I carried everywhere. So we packed up and we went over into the forest, and lo and behold, here's 4 or 5, maybe 3 or 4 anyhow, vehicles, 4-wheel drive vehicles with light-offs, motor generators with big fluorescent lights. I said, God, out in the forest in the middle of the night with all these people, if we get caught out here, this will be a public relations disaster. We'll never answer the mail. So I told all the cops there, be very quiet, just stand still and be quiet here. And the lieutenant said, the object they saw 2 nights before landed right over there, and there's indentations in the ground.
Wow.
So they take me over and show me, and we get the Geiger counter out. And lo and behold, we do get readings that are 8 or 10 times higher than background. And we do a controlled sample over here, you know, way far away from the supposed site. You get 1 or 2 clicks. You come over here, you get 20 or 30 clicks. Actually, deflections to the needle, too. Whoa. And the 3 indentations had greater deflections and more noise than the surrounding area. And the center of the triangle form of the 3 indentations is even higher.
Wow.
So I said, just check the trees. Now, these are tall Corsica pines, about so big, 10, 12, 14 inches diameter. High tree canopy, but nothing low, so you could walk underneath without any problem. Maybe a branch or 2 here and there. We checked the trees. The side of the trees toward the 3 indentations reads much higher than the back side of the trees. Then we noticed broken branches all over the ground there, and when you looked up through the tree canopy, you could see a big opening, like something broke a lot of branches off.
Oh, wow.
And I'm thinking, whoa, this is something else. How am I ever going to explain this? While we're looking at that, one of them, I think it was the lieutenant, looks out and he says, look out there. There's a glowing object out in the farmer's field, which was on the other side of the forest. Whoa, we're watching this thing, and it's about the size of a big basketball or a beach ball. And it's not perfectly round, it's more oval shaped and has a dark center. And it appears to be shedding something like dripping molten metal or sparks or something coming off.
Oh, wow.
I'm thinking, oh God, why did I ever get involved in this? And I'm thinking, I'll bet I'm seeing ball lightning for the first time. I've heard of it, never seen it. While we're watching, it comes into the forest toward us. It moves horizontally through the forest, avoiding the trees. It's like this, through the trees, a little bit up, a little bit down. Obviously, it's under some type of intelligent control or has some kind of sensors in it, something that we can't explain. We're watching, I said, let's try and get close to it. So we try and approach it. It knows we're coming apparently. It goes back out into the field. We're watching the field. We're standing at the edge of the field. There's a barbed wire fence and a little berm there. And while we're watching it, I look at the farmhouse across the way, which is directly across from us, and there's windows on the 1st and 2nd floor, and they're reflecting bright red lights. It's just glowing like the house is on fire.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, wow, I'm glad I'm not in that house. There's no lights on, so you can see it very clearly. And while we're watching it, suddenly, poof, explodes silently into white objects like fireworks, and it's gone.
Wow.
Well, I don't know what to think then. In the meantime, I'm on the command post radio calling them, telling them, you know, hey, there's funny things are going on out here. So let's go out in the field and see if we can find out any evidence. Whatever was coming off may have burned the ground or left some marks, or, you know, there might be something.
Sure.
So we go out in the field, and the only thing we found were cow pies. The cows had been out there earlier.
Yeah.
And I failed to mention a minute ago, whenever we first saw the object, all the barnyard animals went crazy. You could hear all the animals making funny noises.
Oh, interesting.
And then when the object disappeared, it got quiet. This is bizarre. Nobody's going to believe this. I wish I hadn't come out here. So while we're standing there milling around, one of the parties says, look up there. There's 3 or 4 objects up there with multicolored lights on that are moving together in synchronization in a formation. And they're making sharp angular turns. And while we're watching, they look like they're half moons. They turn into full circles, as though they were turned toward the light, if you know what I mean. like the moon does. And they keep moving around and like they're doing a grid search or something. We're watching and say, this is bizarre. Well, somebody in the party says, look out there to the south, there's two very bright white lights, stationary. We're watching them for a minute or two, maybe a little longer, and one of them starts moving at a very high speed. They're up about I'm guessing 3,000 or 4,000 feet. Comes directly overhead and stops. We cannot see a shape, it's so bright. Just a bright, like looking at the sun almost. Suddenly a beam comes down, like a laser beam. It's a concentrated beam, it doesn't fan out, it's a focused beam. And it lands right over there from our 10 or 15 feet from our feet.
Wow.
It's about a foot, 15 inches in diameter. And it's so bright you can see the dust particles in it. Like sometimes you can see, you look through a window when the sun's shining.
Yeah.
And just as suddenly as it appeared, click, it goes. And I'm thinking, is this a weapon? Is this some kind of communication? Is this a warning? What is it? And the object goes back to the south real fast. Then they move over Bentwaters Base, which is about a mile, maybe a little more away. And we can see beams coming down there from similar to what we saw. And I can hear the chatter because the police had police radios with them. And you can hear the chatter from the people in the weapons storage area talking about seeing things in beams of light or whatever. Now, this is just too much. I'm calling the command post. I'm telling them where these objects in the sky are. They have the RAF Rendlesham, which has air defense for our sector and has the big radars. Look here, look there. I'm telling them where to look, see what they can see, and they keep telling me nobody sees anything. There's nothing in the air, nothing flying, nothing.
Huh.
Not true. I'll find out later. But anyhow,
Yeah.
we'll go to that in a second. Well, I'm out there for 2 or 3 hours. We stepped in a stream. We were wet. The wind's blowing hard off the coast. It's cold. It's about 30, 32 degrees.
Uh-huh.
Nobody seems to care or anything. I finally say to the guys, let's pack it in and go home.
Yeah.
So we come back to the base. I go home. I have a little bit to eat. I can't sleep. I take a shower because I was dirty. I go into the office. On the way into the office, we shared the building with the wing commander, who was my big boss, and he pulls up in a staff car. So he overheard me on the radio because he kept his radio on all the time, I think, even when he slept. And he says, that was some night you had last night, wasn't it?
Oh, wow.
I said, you don't know the half of it. I said, I made a tape of it. He said, what? Come on in the office. So I went in the office. I played the tape for him. He said, let me have that.
Oh.
So I gave it to him, the recorder, and all his tape was in the recorder. He said, 3rd Air Force, which is Air Force headquarters in England, has a staff meeting for all the senior officers. And he went every Wednesday morning for the staff meeting. He said, I want to take your tape and play it for the general. And I'm thinking, well, there goes my career. I said, it's it. So that's Wednesday, and this is Monday. All week I worried. And he went to the staff meeting, and I was waiting at the door on Wednesday at noon when he came back. And he got out of the car, started up the steps, and I remember exactly what I said. I said, boss, do I still have a job? And
Yeah.
he laughed and threw me the tape recorder.
Oh, wow.
I said, well, what happened? He just chuckled a little bit. He said, well, I told the general about it. Apparently the general already knew about it. The command post had probably up-channeled something.
Huh.
And he said, I played the tape for the general, and everybody listened. And the general said, well, staff, what do we do? Nobody said anything. Silence. Nobody wanted to say anything. The general said, well, it happened off the base. It's a British affair. Case closed.
Wow.
So I said, you mean that's the end of it? He said, yep, you're out of it. Great. I said, do I do anything? He says, yeah, when Squadron Leader Moreland, who was the liaison officer for the RAF, we had him stationed on the base to handle, things between us and the RAF, comes back. He was on holiday for the Christmas holidays. He'd gone home. When he comes back, get with him, see what he wants to do. He wants a memo or something, do it. Okay, so 10 days go by, and Don Moreland comes back. I go and play the tape for him and tell him, and he says, oh, you put the monkey on me.
Yeah.
So many words. So he makes some phone calls, and he comes back to me and says, write something down, give me a memo, give me a paper, give me something, I'm going to forward it and get this off our back. So I wrote the infamous memo and gave it to him. It was typed in the office on a select typewriter. Only a carbon manifold, which is just the carbon paper, was kept, and somehow Lord knows where it went. So we didn't have a record in the office, which was fine by me. This is gone. I don't want anything to do with it. Unbeknownst to me, he sent a copy to his boss, who was at 3rd Air Force, another liaison officer, in addition to the MOD. Well, the MOD doesn't do anything that we know of. They actually did do something, but I'm told they didn't do anything at that time. And the liaison officer at 3rd Air Force kept a copy in his file. Several years go by, people in the States hear about it. I won't give you all the details. It's too long to explain. And 2 writers came in, UFO writers came in to the base under FOIA, wanted to get a copy of all the material. And Jack Cochran said, then the base commander went back and said, something happened. We don't have any written records. It was true. So they went to 3rd Air Force, and 3rd Air Force didn't have any either. But somebody mentioned, the liaison officer said, oh, I got a copy of that in my file. So he gave it to 3rd Air Force. The 3rd Air Force commander was a friend of mine. He called me up and he said, Chuck, he said, I've got your copy of your memo. I said, how did you get it? He said, well, the liaison officer gave it to me, and I'm going to have to release it. I said, burn it. Don't release it. Your life and mine will never be the same. He said, I have no choice. He released it, and it hit the fan. I met every media, BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, German TV, Japanese TV, Radio World, on and on and on and on. I went into hiding.
Yeah.
So that's basically the story. Now, as years went by and people retired, the truth started coming out, the rest of the story. There were multiple witnesses everywhere. People in the WSA saw triangular objects. When we saw the half moons turn to moons, they said they were actually triangular objects. Because they had powerful binoculars, they were watching them.
Oh, wow.
They saw motherships. They saw stuff coming off the motherships like little drones or sparks or something. All kinds of things. The air traffic controllers came forward and said, we picked it up on radar twice. It went across the screen, what they call a Bright 2. It's a type of radar. 60-mile scope and went across it in seconds. 2,000, 3,000 mile an hour. Twice it went across the screen. He said a normal plane goes blip every sweep. You see a blip, blip, blip. He said this was a streak with a thing behind it. He says, unbelievable. He said, all the years we've been air traffic controllers, we've never seen anything like this. It came back, hovered, glowing orange-red object near them within 100, 150 yards.
Wow.
They saw it go into the forest where we were.
Incredible.
And a whole lot more witnesses have come forward. A total of more than 50 people from 8 or 10 different locations actually saw the glowing objects and saw the objects in the sky. Now, I thought this was all unique and a one-time thing. After I did some TV programs, people started coming out of the woodwork. Said 10 years earlier, we had something similar. 5 years earlier, we had them hovering over the weapons storage area, and some of the cops emptied automatic weapons at them to no effect.
Oh, wow. And
to this day, there's still some incidents that occur there. Just north of there is Sizewell B, a big nuclear power plant. They have 10, 20 sightings of total.
So that seems to be a common theme when people have these sightings, is that if you're around a nuclear facility, you might have these UFOs come by and maybe even deactivate some of the material.
I know some people that have had experiences, personally know them. It's very interesting. There's certainly... I'm convinced there's some type of attraction in that area in addition to the power plant or whatever we had there, or a portal or something that, there's some reason. There's a lot more things happen in that area.
So there's something that's drawing them there in your view that causes that
Interesting
activity.
enough, the nuclear power plant just north of there, just a couple miles, Butley Village just up the road, the home of British witchcraft.
Oh, wow.
How about that? Just to the south of there is Bodsey, where the big experimental radar was established during World War II.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So there's all sorts of things in that area. People report unbelievable things, little monk-like characters, all kinds of things. So who knows? I'm almost convinced now that some of the paranormal things that people hear and see may be somehow related to UFOs. Don't know.
Well, it's an interesting notion that a lot of the hardcore nuts and bolts UFO types will not consider the relationship between some of these more unusual qualities that are experienced, but how can we ignore them when they're part of what people are encountering? So there could be something to it. Now, some people offer this explanation. They try to reduce it all down to simply lights from the local lighthouse. What is your take on that?
Did you ever see a lighthouse move through the forest or send down beams of light from the sky? Did you ever see a lighthouse explode? I mean, that may have happened sometime, but I talked to the lighthouse keeper. I got to know him. Now, the lighthouse is unmanned. He has 4 or 5 lighthouses. In other words, he did the maintenance on them, and they're automated.
Yeah.
He said the lighthouse at Orford Nest, there's a lighthouse. We can see the lighthouse. I know where the lighthouse is. I used to go out to Orford. It's a little town. It has a nice pub. You go out there and have a nice dinner, and away from the base. He says the lighthouse has 3 lenses, red, green, and white, clear. He says the clear one, the white one shines to land. The green and red one are navigational lights to shine to sea. If you saw a red light, you didn't see the lighthouse, buddy. That's what he told me.
Yeah. So we can pretty much put that to rest, that it wasn't the lighthouse.
No. From all the different locations, by the way, I didn't mention there were British civilians that actually saw the objects too.
So there were people all around.
There were like I say, 8 or 10 locations, more than 50 people saw the glowing object.
So if this was taken to court and you had all of these people provide their testimony,
they'd be lined up out the door.
It's incredible to think that. And it seems like this is probably not just the UK's most well-documented case, but maybe even the most modern documented UFO case in the world right now.
With enough witnesses.
It seems like there's a lot to it, and there's still things that are coming out that we could glean from the information that you guys experienced firsthand.
I've tried to tell everything I know about it, and I have a book on it. It's called The Halt Perspective. Mm-hmm. It's available on Amazon. It's 800 pages. It covers everything that I knew at the time. And I've gotten a couple more people have come forward. Actually, the 2 guys that were left at the gate, we couldn't take weapons off the base. So when the cops went off the base, they had to leave a vehicle with 2 people. You can't leave one, you had 2. Those 2 people have come forward. And they've said the same thing. We saw the glowing object.
Yeah.
Both of them, independently.
So this is bringing people out of the woodwork. And I think it's a way for those who had that experience to say, okay, I was there also. I can see someone saying something. Now I guess it's my time to come forward. So you've experienced some people doing that from your involvement.
Yeah. Well, the one person I found, my grown daughter, who was with me at Bentwaters, a high school student at the time, because we had a K through 12 school, was in Manassas, Virginia, in an outdoor store buying a tent. They were going camping. And she said to the clerk, "Do you give a military discount?" And the store manager was standing by, and he said to her, he said, "Were you in the military?" She said, "Yeah, I was in the Army band in Washington," which she was. He said, "Well, I was in the Air Force." She said, "Oh." She said, "Well, where were you stationed?" He said, "Well, first base station was in Bentwaters, England." She said, "What? When were you there?" He said, 1979 to 1981. She said, "Well, maybe you remember my dad." He said, "What was his name?" She said, "Well, my maiden name was Halt." He said, "Colonel Halt." He said, "I was one of the guys that kept the weapons at the gate, and I was pissed because they wouldn't let me go out into the forest."
Oh, wow.
Then he said, "Well, Smitty was with me." So then I found Michael Smith. He was his partner. And he said the same thing. "Man, I saw that glowing thing. Crazy." He said, "I thought about shooting it. I chambered around."
Oh, wow, yeah. Well, we probably wouldn't have seen much, from that happening, as we find out these people have been firing off rounds at some of these objects with, to no avail. Nothing's happening.
Well, I have a friend that in South America that went up with a fighter and fired rockets at it to no effect at all.
Wow.
I mean, he fired salvo after salvo at it, and it didn't do anything.
That's pretty incredible.
It's got some kind of a force shield or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's some different propulsion, there's some exotic technologies at play that we're unaware of. So when it comes to parallel instances where almost halfway across the world, not far from here, over north of Houston, Texas, we had what's known as the Cache Flanger incident, which happened at the same exact time.
Same time. I'm aware. I wasn't aware at first until somebody pointed that out to me. I was one of these conferences or something. Someone said, "Hey, that's the same time they had that incident." I said, "What?" So then I got to reading up on it. I said, "Oh my gosh, same time."
So yeah, do you have
within
any
a matter of
thoughts?
hours.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on how that could be related, if at all?
I really don't know, but I can tell you at the speed the thing moves, obviously, or can move, it could have certainly gone from England to here very quickly.
So it's possible. Well, in closing, there are so many different things that have come up, people that have come forward that have tried to put themselves in the Rendlesham case that may not have been there, and then those who say the lighthouse was the explanation, or people who just don't believe it altogether. What would your send-off be for those who are kind of in those depositions? What would you let them know about being there
what
firsthand?
I've told people like that is you weren't there. If you had been there, you would understand.
Great.
Something happened, and I don't know what it was. Because I get continually asked, "What was it?" I don't know. I wish I did know. So the 3 people that were involved the first night, it's really bothered them. It's ruined their career. They never got promoted. It's ruined their family lives. It's caused all kinds of problems for them. I didn't mention earlier, but after they had the incident in the forest, they were brought in by, I call the spooks. They were given drugs and hypnosis. Yeah, they were, definitely. And they've never been the same.
So it's pretty incredible what can happen if you have these kinds of exotic encounters. And we're fortunate that you were able to make it out after going out there and doing the investigation to see what was there. Originally to try to play it down, but then finding out that there was
disprove it.
Yeah.
In fact, I had Alan Bond. Alan Bond, you don't know who he is, but he's one of the foremost British astrophysicists, brilliant guy, does all kinds of stuff on space work and whatnot. He came up to the base and said, he called me, he said, can I come up and talk? I'll show you what happened. I'll explain it to you. So he came up, so we went out into the forest and I walked him through everything. And he just went away shaking his head.
Wow.
Yeah, he says, I don't know.
That's pretty bizarre. So there's something to it. I like to think that, there's new discoveries that can be made every day, but we won't know if we don't go. And so you've done just that. You went out there to figure out what was going on and then found that it was maybe a matter that truth is stranger than fiction. And there could be a lot more to this case than we realize.
But I don't think we're going to get the answer in our lifetime.
Maybe not.
I would hope so, but don't hold your breath.
On one last note, there is mention that the UK's Ministry of Defence has a Project Condign, and this is a big issue, one of the biggest cases. Do you find that this could potentially be released at some point ever in our future?
That may be. I don't know. I can't comment on it. I'm not familiar with their workings. A good person to talk to about that would be Nick Pope.
Well, we'll have to get in touch with him, but Charles, Mr. Halt, it's been a great pleasure to be able to have you here. Thank you for everything that you've done over the last 40 years and getting this out so that people can know more about the type of instances that are happening, not just for civilian life, but in the military as well. And those that are experiencing this, they can have a supportive group of people to talk with that know that this is happening, and this is a very real phenomenon.
Okay, well, it's been my pleasure. Buy the book and read it. You'll understand more.
If you liked this video, be sure to check out our other content and get connected on our page and social media sites. Every day, new discoveries are being made all across the world and beyond, so let's work together to find out what's next. And remember, we won't know if we don't go. I'll see you in the Vortex.